My fiancé was hugging his first love, saying she'd be the only one he'd ever marry. His mom frowned, clearly displeased. Who do you think you are? We have more than one son. Whoever Sophia chooses will be the heir. Hearing that, I pointed to my fiancé's reserved and composed brother and gave my fiancé a shy smile. Looks like I'm going to be your sister-in-law. In the middle of the night, my future mother-in-law, Susan, woke me up to talk about something concerning Vincent and me. She said it was my right to know. By the look on her face, I knew it wasn't going to be good. Sure enough, the brightly lit living room revealed Vincent sitting in a small sofa clutching a girl by the window like he was on the verge of becoming a raging monster. When he saw me come down, Vincent clenched his jaw. Mom, why are you involving an outsider in our family matters? Susan ignored him, led me to a seat, draped a blanket over my legs, then turned to him. Compared to Sophia, who exactly is the outsider? Vincent's face darkened. Don't say things in anger, Mom. I'm just engaged to Sophia. She's not your daughter-in-law yet. You don't have to protect her. Emily is 1,000 times better, and once we're married, she'll be better than Sophia for sure. Emily, the girl he was hugging, looked like a delicate flower trembling in the wind, with tears streaking her pure face as she clung to Vincent's clothes. Vincent, I never dared to hope you'd marry me. I just came back to check on you. Knowing you're doing well puts my mind at ease. Please, don't fight with your mom because of me or hurt Miss Sophia. Vincent was clearly moved by these words, wanting to comfort Emily deeply. Ugh, it's too much to watch. Susan also seemed displeased, furrowing her brow. She seemed baffled as to how she'd ended up with such a love-struck son. After a while, she sighed. I've only ever had two things I didn't get to choose in my life. The first was my birth. From my great-grandmother's generation, the women in our family have always been the ones in charge. I had to shoulder that responsibility and choose for myself a husband who wasn't talented but was willing to marry into our family. The second is my children. I had two boys, not providing a female heir to the family. I always felt guilty. But it doesn't matter, Susan suddenly smiled. I couldn't choose my sons, but I can certainly choose my daughters-in-law. Sophia is my choice, and in my heart, she's far more important. It was the first time Vincent had heard his mom say something like that, and he was stunned. Unfortunately for him, Susan didn't give him the courtesy of a glance. His behavior was easy to understand. He thought I was an outsider, only in the family because I was engaged to him. Fool. The Greens have stood strong in City A for years, being a real matriarchal clan. Apart from Susan's line, there are numerous other branches. If Susan wasn't so strong-willed, not fancying daughters from other branches, Vincent wouldn't have had the slightest shot at being the heir. In other words, it's not that I'm marrying the heir of the Greens, it's whoever I marry becomes the heir. Sure enough, Susan continued, our family has more than one son. Whoever Sophia chooses will be the heir. After speaking, she took my hand, her expression full of sympathy. It's my fault. I didn't have a daughter, and only a couple of sons to choose from, which makes it hard for you to pick a decent one among them. I quickly shook my head, my eyes darting between the two brothers. Finally, they settled on Vincent's brother, Nick. He was considerably better looking than Vincent, probably taking after his professor father. Nick didn't seem like a businessman, he was more scholarly. Especially with those gold-rimmed glasses on his high-bridge nose, sophisticated yet reserved. Noticing my gaze, Susan hesitated. Sophia, Nick is indeed great, but isn't he a bit too old? Nick was 5 years older than Vincent, 6 years older than me, now already 29. I lowered my eyes shyly. Older guys are more caring. That's what I like. Susan beamed and waved Nick over. Great, your younger brother doesn't deserve Sophia. Since she's chosen you, Nick, you go marry her. For the first time, Nick looked genuinely shocked. He walked over, slender legs striding, and lightly pressed his lips together. Mother, isn't this all a bit hasty for such an important life decision like marriage? Compared to Vincent's carefree nature, Nick really showed those extra 5 years of maturity, conducting himself like a classic gentleman. His words seemed to bring Vincent back to his senses, too. He suddenly didn't care about his first love anymore, almost stumbling over to us, calling out for his mom like he was trying to summon a ghost. "You can't do this. I'm your biological son. Why should our family's assets be decided by an outsider? Nick, say something. You don't want to marry Sophia, right? How can such a vain, cruel woman be worthy of entering our family?" Susan raised her hand and slapped Vincent. "Who do you think you are?" She watched her impractical son with eyes like a hawk. "Vincent, you're my son, and though I'd prefer you weren't, I can't change it. Now Sophia has chosen your brother and will be your sister-in-law. Treat her with respect, and we'll look after you in return." Sister-in-law. Vincent's eyes were red with anger. "She's just some trash I don't want. Do you really think Nick's interested in her? This is all you're doing, forcing it. If you love Sophia so much, why not marry her yourself?" Another slap followed, but this time from Nick. The usually composed man showed a touch of anger and coldly uttered 2 words, "Apologize." Vincent stubbornly held his head. "You can't be sincere about marrying her, can you? Are you not doing it just for the heir title?" Susan perhaps wanted to smooth things over, perhaps knowing well enough that neither of her sons truly wanted to marry me out of love. But I didn't care. Life's too short, who cares who I marry? The Greens had a century of wealth and prestige, and Nick was handsome and well-built. Even if he didn't love me and didn't come home post-marriage, what would I lose? It's a win-win, right? Rich, leisurely, and with a great mother-in-law. If my husband doesn't come home, all the better. Maybe toss in an adorable daughter and I'd be living the dream life. This thought barely crossed my mind when Nick spoke up. "I don't have romantic feelings for Miss Sophia now, but if she's willing to marry me, it's my honor. I'd respect her, care for her, and never let harm touch her. So now, apologize to her for what you just said." Susan was stunned. Vincent was dumbfounded, and my heart raced as though it might burst out of my chest. Truly, sincerity is the ultimate weapon. If my desire to marry Nick was at a 5 before, it shot up to 10 now. I'm not apologizing. I'd love to see how you explain to everyone that a sister-in-law became the sister-in-law. Disgusting. Failing to gain support, Vincent stormed off with Emily, leaving a parting threat. "Good riddance. Peace and quiet are much appreciated." Susan didn't let it bother her, cheerfully joining my hand with Nick's. "Nick, you better mean what you say. If I find out you mistreat Sophia in the future, don't blame me for disciplining my own son." Looking at Nick's silent face, I hesitated before saying, "Susan, can we possibly delay the wedding? Nick and I lack a foundation of feelings. Maybe we should spend more time together first." "Absolutely," Susan readily agreed. "How about this? From today, you two can move into the downtown apartment together. The hustle and bustle's perfect for young people to try out living together before marrying." Settled. That night, our belongings were neatly packed, and Nick and I found ourselves baffled inside the car heading towards the luxurious downtown apartment. It offered great views and refined decoration. Everything was perfect except for one thing: there was only one large bed. I noticed a similar surprise on Nick's face. "You've never been here before, have you?" Nick shook his head and chuckled. "I have a small apartment downtown. This house is under my mom's name." "Makes sense." I glanced around. Everything looked new and the area behind the TV stand was spotless, obviously cleaned recently. When I noticed Nick wearing a pair of slippers that were a size too small, it hit me they were meant for Vincent and me. It was a bit awkward. But Nick was sharp. He caught on immediately and turned his head slightly towards me. "No problem. I'll just buy a new pair tomorrow." I added, "And we need a new bed too." Nick quickly said he'd sleep on the couch tonight. Even though that sofa was tiny and narrow, definitely not suited for a grown man, I didn't suggest we share my bed. Not that I wanted to, and I doubt Nick would be comfortable with it either. Our marriage, based on mutual benefits, had boundaries we both understand. As night fell and I went to wash up, Nick was already on the couch. After saying goodnight, I switched off his light and lay down on the comfy bed, thinking, it's good to be a woman. As I turned over, I came face to face with beady little eyes. Realizing what it was, I jumped to the bed's edge in an instant. Why does this fancy apartment have cockroaches? Maybe it sensed my fear, because that little bugger stumbled around, no flew. A thumb-sized cockroach flew straight at my face. I forgot about bed-sharing rules. I sprinted out of the bedroom into the living room and dove headfirst onto Nick's blanket before he fully woke up. Nick jolted awake, his muscles twitching for a brief moment. Resting a big hand on my waist, he half sat up, the blanket slipping off, revealing a sliver of his toned waist. What's up? Abs. Oops, no, cockroach. It flies. Blushing, I shifted my gaze away. Nick furrowed his handsome eyebrows, covering my eyes with a hand. When he let go, he had slipped on a loose t-shirt, probably his choice for this evening. They say people who sleep naked are the quietest. Nick, who'd have thought? With him around, I calmed down and started thinking rationally. Seeing him move to turn on the light, I passed him his slippers eagerly. Kill that thing, and you'll be my hero. Nick chuckled softly, flipping the light on. Really that scared? You can't squash them. They'll multiply, invisible and swarming everywhere. Stop. I cut him off, pale. If you don't want to share a bed with me every night, say no more. It wouldn't be polite. Nick, amused, made quick work of the little pest. He trapped it with a tissue and used a lighter to burn it to ash before throwing it out the window. Finally relaxed, I urged him to wash his hands and sheepishly asked, "Can you sleep in the bedroom tonight?" Noting his hesitation, I quickly added, I'll take the couch. Nick agreed and kindly brought out my pillow and blanket. I thanked him softly, then buried myself under the covers only after he closed the bedroom door. But the spot where Nick had been was scented with cologne, fresh and appealing enough to make me blush. I couldn't sleep. Tossing and turning until dawn, I only fell asleep haphazardly as light filled the room. When I woke up, Nick had already finished his morning run and breakfast, busy in the study with work. My stomach growled, but being terrible at cooking, I grabbed my phone to order food delivery. Before I could, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages. That was a first. I've always kept my social circles simple, but today it seemed lively. Turns out it was from the Greens family chat group. There were too many branches to count, but 3 close to Susan formed a group to share news. Late last night, Vincent had posted a dozen messages there. Everyone was asleep, so no one responded. By morning, it had started spreading. Too late to delete now. I guessed Vincent had been drinking, otherwise, how would he post such nonsense? Vincent, Sophia, you bitch. Come out here. Vincent, married the brother first, now the other. Shameless. Vincent, what's our stuff to you? Why's mom so biased? Not fair. Vincent, Mom. We need a DNA test. Am I really your son? It went on like that, descending into more mess. I read it with cold amusement. Vincent clearly never bothered to look into me. Up until yesterday, I was his supposed fiancé. How could a legitimate member of the Greens be that naive? He didn't consider I might be a threat and cozying up to Susan the whole time. He didn't know my mom and Susan had been best friends since childhood. When my parents married, Susan wasn't happy and wanted Mom to manage the company with her back in a city. My mom declined, so Susan set her sights on me. Growing up, I'd always wondered why my ordinary employee parents afforded piano lessons, etiquette training, and private schools. Meeting Susan, I realized I was being prepped as an heir. Waiting for me to choose one of her sons as a husband, thereby having a rightful claim over the Greens. Originally she picked Vincent for me given our ages. In hindsight, he was untrustworthy, not just for me, but for the company too. The chat thread was short, so I finished quickly. Everyone was notably shrewd, avoiding direct confrontation with Vincent. Even a little cousin, Vincent's junior by 5 years, added off-topic banter to push his messages down, sparing Susan's embarrassment. Thinking about it, I sighed and was about to call Susan when Nick emerged. Dressed in black silk loungewear, slick against his physique, outlining sharp lines. I reflexively swallowed, and snapped back, silently cursing my own weakness for handsome faces. Sleep well? Hungry? Though asking, Nick was already moving to help. With ease, he flipped the pan, placing a perfect sunny-side-up egg on a plate, alongside crispy toast and milk sweetened for good measure. Thanks. I took my place opposite him after rushing to brush my teeth and wash my face. So have you seen the messages? I asked cautiously, referring to the family chat. Nick glanced up. If you mean my foolish younger brother, I apologize on his behalf. We've spoiled him. Indeed, I'd heard. Back in the day when Susan was busy with her business, Vincent was mostly raised by Nick. At first, I thought Nick was intentionally spoiling his brother, turning him into a slacker. But after meeting him, I realized he wasn't that kind of guy. Nick's genuinely a decent person. He probably really loves his brother, which is why he indulges him a lot. Maybe there's some desire to make up to Vincent on Susan's behalf too. You can't apologize for him forever, he'll have to grow up on his own. Nick was silent for a moment, then nodded. As I finished my last sip of milk, Susan called. I put her on speaker, placing the phone between Nick and me. Sophia, don't worry about what happened in the group chat. I'll make sure that ungrateful child gives you an explanation. It's fine, Susan. I'm not upset. And I wasn't lying. If I got angry over every little thing, I'd have died of anger long ago. Susan let out a sound of approval. You're right not to let this get to you. How are things going with you and Nick? Without blinking, I lied, great. We're planning to go out shopping later. Shopping for a bed, of course, but Susan didn't need to know that. Susan sounded a lot happier and hung up the phone, saying good 3 times in a row. Almost simultaneously, Nick received a hefty 7-figure transfer. He gave a helpless smile and said, Mother need not worry. Whatever you want, I can afford. I smiled back at him and said, then save it for future investments. After tidying up, we headed straight to the shopping mall. The stuff there is pricey but worth it. I quickly picked out a medium soft bed and a spacious couch. As Nick was signing the bill, he joked, if Mother found out a Swiss designer couch lost because it wasn't big enough, she'd have a good laugh. Leaning beside him, I casually replied, she knows. He shot me a sideways glance. Initially, I didn't think much of it until he said, didn't you say you chose me because you liked? Stop. I motioned at him to zip it. Silence. Sign the bill, then go home. Behind his gold-rimmed glasses, a soft smile crept across Nick's face, melting his usual reserved demeanor into something warm and gentle. Suddenly, he pulled me over. I stumbled into his arms, and before I realized it, there was a burst of friendly laughter behind me. Turning around, I saw a lovely young woman with a microphone, and a cameraman lugging a camera. Hello, she greeted me with a broad smile. Are you a couple? She asked. I steadied myself and exchanged a quick look with Nick, who nodded first. Fantastic. She exclaimed. We're from the In Relationship show. Could we do a quick interview with you too? We'll add it at the end of our show as a bonus. I've watched that show. It's a dating reality show, and they usually feature randomly interviewed couples at the end, people who are not from the show but are real-life couples, and they're usually quite charming and good-looking. Initially, I didn't want to be on camera, but seeing her sweaty head, clearly having had difficulty finding participants, I figured, girls gotta help girls, so I bit the bullet and agreed. It then dawned on me that I hadn't asked Nick. You decide, he said. I'm good with whatever you choose. Your boyfriend is so considerate, she said, clapping with a pleased smile. Can we shoot at the cafe over there? Sure, I said, trailing the crew. Nick checked the time for the bed delivery before following along. The interview was straightforward, no tough questions, mostly about how long we've been together, how we met, each other's likes, you get the idea. Nick and I, without skipping a beat, casually fibbed. You can't really say you've been together for just 2 days, can you? But the last request threw me off. Okay, that just about wraps it up. Could we end with a sweet kiss for the show? Could we? Definitely not. I haven't had my first kiss. So, I shot Nick a look. He paused for 3 seconds, slightly furrowed his brow, then gently leaned over and brushed my forehead with a light, tender kiss. His lips were dry and cool, soft as feathers. Oddly enough, I wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt quite nice. They got their footage without insisting on a lip kiss and handed me a small gift before leaving. But Nick and I were left in an awkward silence because of this perplexing kiss. Back home, we set up the bed, cooked, and had dinner, all smooth yet strange. What broke the awkwardness was a video call from Susan. It wasn't for me but for Nick. He went to the study to take it. Walking past, I overheard Susan scolding him sternly. Why are you sleeping in separate beds? Nick, I have only one expectation of you. Hold on to Sophia's heart. Is that so hard to do? You've really let me down. For the first time, I felt Susan was being a bit unfair to her son. Nick's got impressive skills. I've seen how he handles company projects, clean and sharp. He could achieve way more than staying home and tending to the homestead. He should be making waves in the business world. So, I just went in, took the phone from him, and said, Susan. Sophia? Did we wake you? It's nothing. I was just reminding Nick to take good care of you. I smiled brightly. Got it, Susan. But don't be too hard on him. I'd feel bad, he's not very articulate. We bought a new bed not to sleep separately but because the old one wasn't comfy. True to form, Susan's expression brightened, relaxing instantly. Oh, I see. Nick, why didn't you say so? Good choice, it's important to sleep well. I chatted a bit more about work and then ended the call. Nick thanked me and said, you didn't have to cover for me. So you'd rather Susan choose you out? Vincent, you're older than me, yet you still have this rawness about you. You should learn to adapt rather than be like a mute gourd, taking everything as it comes. Maybe it's the academic influence from his dad that gives Nick this clueless honesty. Kinda naive. He stood there, mouth opening and closing, and finally, managed to say, Are you mad? No. I looked away, not sure how to explain the random anger bubbling inside me. Nick scrunched his fingers. If that kiss today made you uncomfortable, I apologize. Why is he bringing that up again? I realized following a man's train of thought is like searching for a needle in a haystack. I just couldn't keep up. Silence again. My irritation peaked just as Vincent called. Perfect, a distraction. Picking up, his slurred, mumbling voice came on, and Nick's gaze turned icy in an instant. Sophia, come pick me up, quick. Did you hear me? Get here now. Where are you? I asked. B bar, he slurred, 1998 bar. Hurry up, no dawdling. I chuckled, got it. But why should I pick you up? There was silence for a moment, then he said, because I'm your fiancé. Don't you know you're supposed to obey your husband? I tell you to do something, you do it. I cursed silently, glancing at Nick. He grabbed the phone from my hand, hung up, and walked out saying, I'll go check it out, you get some rest. I followed him and said, I'll go with you. He paused but didn't refuse. He only reminded me to wear more clothes, 'cause it was windy out. By the time Nick and I got to that 1998 bar, the place was a mess. Vincent was kind of half sitting, half laying on a couch with broken bottles everywhere. As soon as I stepped in, a bottle came flying at me but Nick blocked it with his arm. You alright? Yeah, I'm fine. Then Nick's demeanor turned cold. He grabbed Vincent by the collar. Does this look good? Vincent squinted at him, laughed, and exhaled boozy breath. Oh, it's Nick, huh? The one who stole my fiancé. What? You here to show off your love? I stepped in front to make sure Nick wasn't outsmarted by him and said coldly, you called us here, don't forget that. You're making a fool of yourself. That seemed to trigger Vincent. He attempted to punch me but Nick stopped him effortlessly, slamming him back onto the couch. Suddenly, a woman rushed in crying like someone had died. Vincent, are you okay, Vincent? Emily appeared out of nowhere, crying on Vincent's chest while her other hand grabbed Nick's shirt. Nick, I know Vincent's a mess, causing you trouble, but he really just wants more attention from you guys. Really? I frowned, peeled her fingers off Nick's shirt, feeling super annoyed. This shirt isn't gonna make it. Nick smirked slightly. Alright, I'll ditch it when we get back. Emily's face went red and white, biting her lip. Sophia, I know you don't like me, but Vincent and I are in love. And honestly, we were together first. If it wasn't for his mom liking you and forcing him to get engaged, we wouldn't have split. The bystanders took this as me being some villainous girlfriend ruining true love. Pathetic tricks. I was about to speak, but Nick got there first. Vincent begged you not to leave, but you left for study overseas. Later on, learning he's from the Greens, you hurried back to ruin his marriage, even encouraged him to rebel against his mom. As long as I'm around, the Greens will have no place for you. He took my hand. As for Sophia, she's my fiancé, so don't be climbing the wrong tree. As soon as he said that, the bar door opened and our driver rushed in. I nodded toward Vincent. Get them back to the old house. Yes. The bar was too crowded, all kinds of people. Can't let Vincent completely disgrace the Greens. Nick followed me out. Should we let Susan know about this? I wagged a finger. Now's not the time to be a saint. And plus, why do you think Vincent got plastered for no reason? You know? Nick's expression turned serious. By the time we got back, the old house was lit up. I hadn't told Susan we'd come, but she was sitting on the couch, dressed and waiting. Nick and I shared a look. We knew something was up. The driver helped Vincent to the couch. But he rolled himself onto the floor, twitching, staying still. Emily faced Susan's wrath, turning pale, kneeling by Vincent, too scared to move. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Nick nudged my hand, and I whispered to him, they look like they're selling their bodies to pay for a funeral. The laughter flickered in his eyes, but he stifled it, whispering back, cut it out. After he stood up straight, I rubbed my hot ear, heart beating faster. Susan missed our little exchange. Her gaze weighed down on Vincent, complex, hesitant, but then determined. Nick, she called, get some water, wake your brother up. Nick nodded but showed mercy, using room temp water instead of cold. He poured it over Vincent's face, gave him a special hangover pill. About 10 minutes later, Vincent finally opened his eyes, dazed, with Emily wiping his face. He grabbed her hand, angered. Emily, have you been crying? Who bullied you? Emily shook her head violently, signaling him to look ahead. Susan, probably this first time being ignored. Mom? Vincent glared at us. Why am I here? Oh, he had a blackout. Susan stayed silent, examining her son repeatedly. Even I was a little unsure inside. Eventually, Susan said, did you mess up the project? Vincent confused, what project? A stack of files was tossed at Vincent's feet, a paper cut marking his brow. He winced, picking up to glance at them, dismissively. Oh, that. The CEO's a sleazebag, the Greens won't stoop to such trash. Susan laughed out of anger. Trash? Won't stoop. Great, you're such a good son. Do you know your won't stoop made us lose 35 million? Who's covering that? You? Or the one who egged you on? Susan's sharp gaze fell on Emily, who quickly looked down, shivering. Vincent pulled her into his arms. frowning, Mom, this isn't Emily's fault. Did you get some twisted info? Susan, not young anymore, showed an unusual frailty and fatigue on her well-maintained face. I pursed, having some info on the Hongxing project too. It wasn't a big deal or it wouldn't have been handed to Vincent. Just follow protocol, sign the deal, no way it would have gone wrong. Yet it did. Vincent breached it single-handedly, handing Hongxing a free $35 million, obviously exploited. Considering Susan's mention of Emily? I took Nick's palm, wordlessly tracing 4 letters, spy. He nodded. No wonder Emily settled abroad then returned due to a baseless rumor, and even after finding no base and Vincent not being an heir, she didn't leave him. Seems someone from behind funded her. Susan ignored Vincent, speaking to Emily, are you going to confess, or should I send you to jail first? Emily shivered worse, tears pooling on the wool carpet, sprawling wet. Vincent sprang up, rudely pointing at Susan and yelling, your bias for Sophia has limits, right? Did she say something for you to slander Emily? She just loves me, wants to be with me, what has she done wrong? Sophia, say it, what will it take to leave her alone? Enough. Susan hurled a glass tumbler, becoming a tight-strung bow. While still deadlocked, I wanted to talk but Nick held me back by my arm. Susan suddenly spoke, tell me, would you give up everything for this woman? Emily, grasping for hope, clutched Vincent's shirt, hiding in his embrace, whispering something. Vincent nodded, yes, for Emily, I'd give up everything. Susan closed her eyes, reopening them with clarity. You can marry her, I won't interfere. But likewise, you'll have no ties with the company. I'll hold a press conference announcing your separation from the Greens. From now, you're free. The whole living room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Nick suddenly called out to Susan. Don't you two say a word. Susan looked over. Vincent insulted Sophia multiple times before, and you didn't stand up for her. Now you're stopping me from giving Sophia an explanation? Vincent, realizing what was happening, stood up shakily and called out, Mom. I am your mother. Susan's gaze turned back, and she gave a small smile, not anymore. For this woman, you're unfaithful to your fiancé, disrespectful to your biological mother, and disloyal to the company. We can't have a descendant like you in the family. You take her and leave. Starting tomorrow, I'm cutting off all your bank cards, and everything under your name, property, vehicles, companies, storefronts, will not belong to you anymore. The lawyer will handle the transfer. At this point, Vincent looked even more unstable than Emily. Realizing the truth at last, he understood his carefree lifestyle was not thanks to his own abilities, but because he was Susan's son. But perhaps driven by pride in front of the woman he loved, Vincent nodded, gritted his teeth, and left the family home with Emily in tow. Before he could leave, Nick called out to him, you still owe Sophia an apology. Vincent turned back, impossible. I'm no longer your son, so you can't control me. You might be climbing the ladder by pleasing a woman, but I refuse. He seemed so stubborn. Once the door slammed shut, I walked over to Susan and poured her a glass of hot water. If, and I mean if, Vincent sees Emily's true colors someday, would you let him come back? Susan brushed her fingers over the cup, we'll see. It's an ambiguous answer, but I really hope one day Vincent truly realizes his mistake. Susan has gone through a lot in her life, full of glory yet not without struggle. She shouldn't be stabbed in the back by her own son when she deserves to enjoy happiness. Okay, enough about him. Susan clasped my hand and relaxed. Your engagement to Nick is set for the end of the year. We'll have the wedding in early spring after the new year. I'll bring your parents to visit so they can meet the future son-in-law. How about that? I nestled against Susan, as long as you're happy, I'd even get the marriage certificate tomorrow. You. Nick was quietly standing behind us, not interrupting. I reached out and tugged him to stand in front of Susan. I remember you mentioned once that you'd like me to join the company sooner. I think Nick is also very capable. Can he come help me as well? Previously, the only tasks Nick and Vincent could touch were from branch offices, projects nowhere near important enough for the headquarters to handle. But I'm definitely going into the headquarters. After all, Susan is waiting for me and Nick to marry so she can pass down power. Nick shouldn't be stuck in tedious, unimportant side projects at the branch. He deserves better. Susan's glance darted between us, and she smiled broadly. All right, if you want to work together, I'm pleased. Nick pressed his lips, not refuting my suggestion. It wasn't until we left the family home and got in the car that he spoke softly. You know what? When I was little, I always dreamt of proving myself to Mom and getting into the headquarters. His eyes had a touch of grievance and sadness but were still smiling. I didn't expect you to make it happen just like that. My heart softened. I reached over and smoothed the lines on his forehead. Do you resent it? What? Resent Susan's unfair treatment. Even though your talent and ability rival mine, you were never seen, always waiting like a tool to be chosen. Even once due to my engagement to Vincent, the Greens completely gave up on you. Nick started the car, his voice scattered by the wind. Perhaps I was resentful, but I eventually came to terms with it. Whatever the case, I have you to thank for at least giving me an opportunity. The next day, Susan held a press conference and decisively ousted Vincent from the family. Life for Nick and me suddenly became peaceful. We commuted together each day. Sometimes he cooked my favorite meals, or made me drink vegetable juice he'd freshly squeezed. And finally, his skills showed during the project. Nick saved the day, not only renegotiating cooperation but also acquiring evidence of Emily being a corporate spy. It was a classic two birds one stone victory. The day Susan publicly praised him, the bright look in his eyes was wonderful to see. Before the engagement party, Susan brought my parents over. The day Nick met them for the first time, he took 3 hours choosing clothes, like a dress-up game. How does this look? I propped my chin and admired. I think you look great no matter what you wear. Then, we both blushed. The last outfit he tried on clung to every curve, broad shoulders, and narrow waist. Paired with gold-rimmed glasses and slicked-back hair, he looked smart yet appealing. Finally, he wore that look to the restaurant. Naturally, my parents liked him. When I told my mom about Vincent and me, she worried he wouldn't take care of me. But now with Nick, she seemed eager for us to tie the knot right away. After the meeting, Nick exhaled a long breath in the car. What's up? He didn't speak but squeezed my hand, slightly damp. I was nervous, kept sweating. I chuckled. What's there to be nervous about? You're acting like it's the real deal. Regretting my words immediately, Nick gave a confused pause, the smile fading. I quietly gave my leg a little slap, wondering why I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Then, we awkwardly entered an unspoken silence. No, to be exact, it was my unspoken silence. Because only then did I mull over Nick's words and his reaction in the car. I think he might have some feelings for me. Sure, I'm a bit captivated by his looks, but everything feels just right now, and I'm not eager to take that step forward. What I didn't expect was for Emily to show up at the engagement party. Vincent didn't come, she came alone, with a girl who seemed a lot like her. The two of them cheerfully linked arms and approached me. Emily, thinking she hid her provocation well, was actually obvious. Sophia, let me introduce you, this is Mandy, Nick's childhood friend. I kept my smile, gave a once-over, and nodded, nice to meet you. Mandy held my hand weakly and then winced with a frown. When she let go, her hand had turned red. Emily immediately shouted, Mandy, what happened to your hand? How did you get hurt? Guests from all around looked over, clearly craving some drama. Nick came over too, and I noticed that he hesitated when he saw Mandy. Nick, Mandy called out softly with her eyes red, then turned to Emily, I'm fine. It's not Sophia's fault, I'm just too delicate. Nick glanced down, indeed, delicate. In this situation, shouldn't I be questioned for using too much force and hurting someone? Mandy began to tremble, unsure if it was from anger or sadness. Seeing her shaking more and more, Nick gestured to the security guard. Is there something I can help you with? It seems like this lady is having a seizure. Please, take her to the hospital, Nick said. Mandy reached out as if to tug on Nick's sleeve, but he quickly stepped back. The security guard understood and escorted Mandy and Emily out. After they left, the ceremony officially began. For some reason, because of Mandy's appearance, my initial excitement faded a bit. That was until Nick pulled out a ring. It wasn't some extravagant jewel for show, but a clumsily made ring. He knelt on one knee, his face turning red all the way to his neck, but his gaze was serious. I made this ring myself. Sophia, will you marry me? Nick's voice was so quiet that only I heard it, the guests didn't catch a word. He seemed scared of frightening me, or maybe scared I'd say no. But why would I refuse? This was our engagement party after all. So I gave him a genuine smile, covered my mouth in surprise, and extended my hand. He didn't move, staring intensely. Do you really know what I'm asking? My heart was beating wildly. I knew, but I didn't want to know. I reached down to take the ring and felt cold sweat. He was nervous. I will, I sighed. Hurry up and put it on, everyone's watching. Nick smiled, like a house catching fire, and hurriedly slid the ring onto my ring finger, intertwining our fingers tightly. Once the ceremony ended, we returned to the old house. Susan had to attend some engagements and would come back late. Nick cooked up some noodles for me. Don't go to bed hungry. Come and eat. He sat across from me, now sporting a ring that matched mine. Before I could ask, he explained, Mandy was my desk mate in high school. She seems keen to tell people we're a couple. And in reality? I asked. Just classmates, not close. I nodded. Got it, Emily probably came on purpose. Has Vincent contacted you recently? Nick shook his head. He's not doing well. My friend mentioned seeing Emily coming out of a Bugatti and going to a hotel. Pretty clear what that means. Emily is used to spending big, once abandoned, and Vincent can't bankroll her. She naturally looks for another route. And him? Nick brushed my lips and lowered his gaze. It's our first official day together. Let's not talk about other men. I was taken aback. What do you mean officially together? Nick frowned. You accepted my ring. Doesn't that mean you're agreeing to date me with marriage in mind? Weren't we already getting married? It's different. Nick stared straight at me, repeating, it's different. Suddenly, my heart felt scorched by him, unsure how to react. Do I like Nick? I should, very much. Maybe he's the one worth taking that step for. Nick's manner didn't change much, whether before confirming our relationship or after. The only difference was he started getting jealous, and quite clingy. Especially when I'd mentioned some handsome celebrity or a charismatic CEO, he would stay silent, then subtly flaunt his physique or land a more impressive project. Like a peacock showing off. I noticed but didn't point it out. It was kinda cute. Guess that's how it is with men who sleep in the nude, they're secretly sassy. Before the wedding, Vincent dropped by the old house. After months of not seeing him, he looked thinner, worn out. Seeing Nick and I together didn't cheer him up. He turned to me, Sophia, I realized my mistake and regret it. We were supposed to be engaged, will you let us go back to how it was? I held Nick's hand tighter. Get help if you've lost your mind. You should call me sister-in-law now. Vincent turned away silently, got called into the study by Susan, and left without much fuss. The day before the wedding, I went to the shop where Nick made my ring to craft a man's version myself. But during a quick restroom break, the packaged ring disappeared. What luck. I had to make another one, ending up with 3 nasty cuts on my hand. At the wedding, my dad personally handed me over to Nick. For a moment, it felt all so real. I was truly going to spend my life with this man. It was kind of magical. As we exchanged rings, I took out one just as clunky as his and slid it onto Nick's finger. He looked shocked, eyes burning like he wanted to devour me. He gripped my hand tight, whispering in my ear, "Can I kiss you, Sophia?" Tilting my head slightly, I sealed his mouth with mine. He wrapped his arms around my waist, deepening the kiss. People below applauded kindly, all captured by the cameras. I thought, when our kids are born, we'll show them this. I really do like Nick. Maybe even more than I realized. As the kiss ended, Vincent abruptly came up with a bouquet. Nick accepted it graciously, but we both noticed Vincent's identical ring to Nick's on his hand. Vincent raised an eyebrow, eyes gleaming with satisfaction after the revelation. Nick and I quietly kept our secret. After the wedding reception, I explained, after making the first ring, I went to the bathroom. When I came back, it was gone, so I had to make another one. I believe you, Nick said without questioning me. His kindness wrapped around me, almost melting me. That night, we put everything behind us and truly shared a bed. The moonlight tangled in the trees, swaying gently with the wind. No sleep all night. The next noon, I was half asleep when Nick wiped my face. I opened my eyes and saw a ring in his hand. The one I lost that ended up on Vincent's finger. Where did you get it? I was surprised by how hoarse my voice was. I needed a drink of water first. Found it on the living room table. Vincent was sent abroad by his mom and probably won't be back. I kind of guessed it. Earlier, when using Nick's computer, I saw he'd sent the evidence of Emily being a corporate spy to Vincent. He returned to the old house later. He just wasn't smart enough and tried to fight Nick, which is why Susan sent him away. I guess it's for the best. I lay on Nick's chest, happily staying in bed. This must be what people mean by all is well. Months later, Emily was taken to court. Nick appeared to present the evidence. Afterward, I waited for him outside the courthouse. Headed home? I asked. No rush, he said, giving me a quick kiss and starting the car. First, let's go to the hospital. Are you hurt? What happened? Nick reassured me, gently patting my head. Not me, you. Sophia, you're late by quite a few days now. What? I think you should get a prenatal checkup. Epilogue. On our first wedding anniversary, Vincent called Nick, crying and regretting his mistakes, begging us to speak to Susan to bring him back from abroad. It wasn't until then we found out he wasn't in some developed country. He was in a small, underdeveloped, and poor Southeast Asian nation, where you had to build your house with your own hands. Vincent, living the spoiled life, obviously struggled. Susan ordered the people she sent with him to make him do everything for himself. In just over half a year, Vincent was a changed man, realizing how absurd he'd been. Apparently, even the locals wanted to capture him as backup food, but Susan's people rescued him just in time. After hanging up, Nick and I shared a knowing smile. That's Susan, all right, truly cunning. But he wouldn't be back until his 3 years were up. By my count, Vincent still has to build at least one more house and find more hard labor to get him through the rest of his time there. Hopefully, by then, he'll have truly learned his lesson.